Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Jazz Flashes podcast. It's that time of year again, and so we're ready for the yearly Bing Crosby podcast. My name is Anton Garcia-Fernandez, and I am talking to you from the small town of Martin here in the state of Tennessee in the United States of America, and welcoming you to this yearly Bing Crosby podcast. We're going to be talking today about an era in Bing Crosby's career that you don't usually hear a lot about. You think about other singers, musicians, groups when you think about the 1960s, and maybe not so much about Bing Crosby, but he was making quite a few records. He was making some movies. He was on TV. He was still everywhere, and he still did a lot of work. And that's what we're going to be doing on this episode this year. It's December, and so we say hello to our guests. We have three this year again, just like last year, but this is a very special podcast because it's the 10th yearly Bing Crosby podcast. We've began 10 years ago, and hey, a decade later, here's we still are talking about Bing Crosby with our guests, starting with someone that was there when we began these yearly Bing Crosby podcast 10 years ago. He is at his home in Wilmslow in Cheshire, and it's not the Cheshire cat, but it's a cat that knows his Bing Crosby really well. Co-editor of Bing Magazine for the International Club Crosby, Mr. Malcolm Macfarlane. Malcolm, welcome to the 10th episode. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Anton. Yep.
Good to see you, and good to see also somebody who joins us from Winnick, also in Cheshire, not too far away from uh, Malcolm, for well, about 2 years now or so. He has been hosting the monthly ICC meetings that you can find on this YouTube channel. There's a playlist for them. And thanks to him, we get together and we talk about Bing Crosby every first Sunday of every month. And it's Mr. Jason Liddiard. How are you, Jason?
Hello, hi Anton. Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Still feel like I'm in with the big boys here.
Well, if we are talking about the 1960s era of Bing Crosby's career today, it's precisely because during one of those meetings that we have every first Sunday of the month, we had a presentation very recently, and you can still, go and find that on the playlist and watch that presentation about Bing Crosby on Reprise Records, which is something that happened in the 1960s. And the person that did that excellent presentation and gave me the idea to concentrate on the 1960s for this episode today is joining us from Solihull. I hope I pronounced it well enough. Probably not like a local. It's in the Midlands in the UK. Mr. Ken Crossland. Hello, Ken. How are you?
Hi, Anton. I'm very well. Looking forward to our chat and discussion.
Well, I'm also looking forward to talking about this lesser known part of Bing Crosby's career, but really interesting part. And, we hope that everybody out there who is joining us for this podcast will find it enjoyable, or as old Bing himself would say in his musical autobiography, at least endurable if you're snowbound or there's a bus strike or something, right? So hopefully no bus strikes. Hopefully you're not snowbound. But here we are. We're going to be starting, I think, talking about the 1960s. It's an era of Bing Crosby's career that is not as discussed as others are. But I hear that Ken uh, has some data that kind of gives us an idea of how much Bing Crosby really did in the 1960s. He wasn't just golfing and fishing and hunting. He was doing a whole lot more, right?
Absolutely. And it will surprise you, I think, because it surprised me when I just sat down yesterday and did a little bit of number crunching and looking at some of the records just to see what we'd got. Over the course of that decade, 1960 to 1969, Bing recorded a total of 228 individual musical sides. There were a few things issued that were talking interviews and stuff like that. I haven't counted those. So 228 songs, if you want to put it that way. And that compared with the previous decade where he did 398. So almost twice as many in the 50s. And that doesn't include all the Buddy Cole radio recordings. So I'm talking purely about commercial recordings. And it's also interesting if you look at the 60s, of those 228, 3/4 of them came between 1960 and 1965. And his recording career virtually dried up. In 66, there were only two songs recorded. In 67, there were four. In 69, there were none. 68 was the outlier because he recorded 43 titles in 1968. But the last 4 years of the decade, only 49 songs between them. And we might come back to a discussion later as to what were the factors that influenced that. One factor was undoubtedly what was going on in the music business, because I think you'd find something similar with a lot of other singers. But if you look at how those sides then manifested themselves, Bing recorded 16 albums as the featured performer through the 1960s. He also recorded 2 soundtrack albums that he was either one was the road film, the other was Robin and the Seven Hoods, so he was in there with the Rat Pack, and he contributed to 3 of the Reprise compilation albums, the Reprise Repertory Theatre. But there were 16 albums as the featured performer, and if you look at how those 16 albums break down, that's quite interesting too, because among the 16 there were 4 duet albums. There were 2 Christmas albums, there was a Latin album, there was a country album, there was a Hawaiian album, there were 3 sing-along albums, and then there were 3 what you might call concept albums, Hey Jude, the songs of the era and so on. And actually, for me, what's interesting about that is that had that been a planned decade, that result would look pretty good. If you were working to a contract with one company with a regular musical director and you work to that sort of plan over the course of 10 years, there's a real nice variety around the recordings that were made. But except that that's not what happened at all. These are all largely ad hoc, because those 16 albums actually appeared on 8 different labels over the course of the decade. Warner Brothers, Decca, MGM, Reprise, Capitol, Longines, Pickwick, and Amos. 2 or 3 in there that really were not worthy of a singer of Bing's stature and reputation. But again, it was by chance rather than by direction that we ended up with that nice spread of albums that we had. Lastly, there were only 7 singles recorded during the 60s as singles. There were more than 7 singles issued by taking tracks from albums, but there were only 7 that were actually recorded as singles. And those 7 singles, amazingly, appeared on 5 different labels. So it's, again, a very ad hoc, sort of hopscotch type of output that we were getting from Bing in that era. Partly, well, more than partly, probably significantly reflecting what Bing wanted to do, I suspect, at that time. But more there than I expected to find. And it gives us a backcloth to dig into some of those albums and some of the reasons as to why it manifests itself in that way.
Yeah, I too was surprised actually, Ken. I did like you. I did a little bit of homework yesterday, not as comprehensive as yours, but just to look at the output. And the first thing that I found was in that first half of the 60s, there were years when he recorded 3 and even 4 albums
Mhm.
in the one year. And the other
Yeah,
thing that struck me was the contrast in the content and the production of some of those albums throughout the 60s. In fact, from sing-along albums to what arguably one of his greatest, which was the "I Wish You a Merry Christmas" album,
mhm.
one of his greatest albums of all time, really. And I'm not a fan of the sing along albums, but they have a little nostalgic corner in my head because in the 60s, right, I would say right to the end of the 60s and maybe even into the early 70s, if I went to a family gathering, a family party, with grandparents or a great auntie or something, those sing-along concept albums were really popular. Everything from Mitch Miller to Pinky and Perky to Max Bygraves and the cast of Coronation Street. Anyone, and everyone was doing those, and they were always played at family parties. And I think
Mm.
probably I hated them even then. I think they just seemed so monotonous, and I think Bing was just jumping on that popular bandwagon at the time was probably the reason, at least, for doing the those sing along albums.
One of the things that that you realize is that even this late in his career, and I'm always interested in the latter part of the career of singers and musicians that I enjoy. One thing that you realize is that Bing Crosby was still being as eclectic as he had been before. There's a lot of different styles, different types of records that he was making in the 60s, even if the output was not as huge as it had been before. That is still there. That's still a characteristic, a feature of his recorded output in the 60s. Malcolm, how do you view the career of Bing Crosby once the 60s rolled around with all the changes that implied in society and politics and in the music business?
Well, he gave an important interview in 1966 when he just said, "I don't sing so well anymore. I put one of my records on, take it off within moments of that thing finished." He'd lost his confidence. He'd been so busy beforehand up to that mid 60s, and then he clearly lost his confidence, probably his enthusiasm, which is why there's that huge tail off. It's amazing that they persuaded him to do Hey Jude, Hey Bing. Must have been quite a fight to get him to do that.
Now, regarding the fact that very often, Bing was had his own sort of production company, and then he would record a certain project. He was doing this already by the 1950s, but in the 60s, this became the norm for him. And then he was selling the masters to or leasing the masters, I guess, to this or that record company. How do you think that impacted his career and his choice of material and the kind of, albums and recordings that came out during the 60s?
It's a great pity he didn't have um, a knowledgeable man guiding him. I mean, he had a number of people guiding him, but he could have really done with a supremo to guide his stuff through. And I mean, I don't know, it's so mixed, but there's still
He
some good
needed
stuff
a
in there.
he needed a musical director, didn't he?
Yeah, so that's right.
He
Yeah,
probably didn't
Yeah.
think he did, but from our point of view, I mean, if you look at some of the other singers, Perry Como had Nick Perito by
yeah,
his side through most of the 60s. Tony Bennett had Ralph Sharon, who was
Yeah.
the driving force. I mean, Sinatra had probably Sonny Burke, I guess, through that decade. And Sonny Burke would have been the sort of guy who could have worked very closely with Bing because they went back, a long way, and they worked together again in the 70s. Of course, Buddy Cole's death was a factor in
yeah,
64.
yeah.
Buddy Cole was never replaced in Bing's entourage.
Yeah.
Um, I
We,
suspect
we could,
Malcolm's right that Bing had lost enthusiasm, lost confidence, wasn't really looking for anybody, wouldn't have been responsive. I mean, the great thing was that when finally that person turned up in the mid-70s in the shape of
Yeah,
Ken Barnes, Bing was responsive to it, and it just showed then what could be done with Bing being guided and
yeah,
to a degree directed into certain areas.
yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say, Ken. We can see the difference because of what happened in the 70s when he was guided and when Ken Barnes took him by the hand and led him out the door and eventually. Yeah.
But
We
the strange thing is the point about the loss of confidence. I think you're absolutely right. But I'm always struck when we have the monthly meeting and we look at a piece of TV video like the one we had this Sunday just gone, which was the '69 Christmas show. I think it was. I sit there thinking, gosh, Bing sings so well. I mean, the voice was there. It didn't always sound that way on the records, but when you hear Bing singing on TV, or indeed when you hear him singing on something like the African Safari record, a private record for fun, the voice was there. It wasn't impaired. There was a deepening of and bit of loss of range, perhaps that came with age, but um, his loss of confidence was unfounded, really.
I agree. I agree.
It didn't make sense when he appeared so confident and so often on TV, whether it was Hollywood Palace or his own TV specials or somebody else's. As you say, he always put in a great performance still.
and
And
I
of
was
course,
gonna
we'd heard Bing say it in interviews. As Malcolm said, I don't sing so good. I need the band pumping up a little bit these days. And if there was no one there to argue against him and say, well, no, we don't need that, Bing. We need you here up front. Then of course Bing would get his way.
well, you mentioned the Hollywood Palace and Bing in the 60s was getting, major exposure on TV still through the Hollywood Palaces, the Christmas, shows and different appearances on other people's shows. Do you think that that might have been a factor in him not being as interested in recording so much since he was already getting quite a bit of exposure on the television?
Yes, could have been. Yeah, yeah, could be a reason. I mean, he was
I
a
mean,
busy
Bing,
man. Fitting in the show business bit was a problem for him. He was too busy with his other activities, didn't he? Really?
I mean, Bing could, he was a smart guy and he could see the way the music business was going. And there was that change around the middle part of the decade. I mean, Perry Como recorded nothing between 1963 and 1965. Did one album in 65, one in 66, one in 67, and it tailed off. Tony Bennett maybe did two albums a year. Sinatra did a bit more through Reprise and so on. But I mean, I think the message all of those singers gave was that from sort of around 65, 66, 67, the only thing the record labels were really interested in were the groups.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
even Elvis, Elvis didn't record a studio album, I don't think, between 62 and 68.
Other than
Other than the
the
film soundtrack.
soundtracks and then
Yeah,
some singles, yeah,
yeah. I
you're
think
right.
there's maybe one in 64, but maybe three studio albums between 62 and 68. I mean, it was because you weren't a group. It was the Beatles really did turn the music world on its head, and it was some years before the individual singers um, you know, found a piece of dry land, I think.
Now we know that Bing Crosby recorded, and we know it also because it's right there behind Jason, right? And his background is that Hey Jude, Hey Bing album. We know Bing recorded Hey Jude by the Beatles, a song written by Paul McCartney. But what do you think Bing Crosby's relationship with these changes that were going on in the music business, this new music, the music for the younger generations, was. Do you think he respected that music, that he was in any way knowledgeable about it, or did he just, or was it just not interested?
I think he was. He did, in fact, at least one interview, probably one of the Parkinsons, when he was able to name, one or two of the more recent songwriters. He certainly had respect for the songwriters, but even then, it would have been the likes of Burt Bacharach and Rod McEwen rather than Lennon and McCartney. I've never heard him mention Lennon and McCartney's songwriting abilities in an interview.
Also because even though, he was a more conservative kind of person politically by that era, he had always been a proponent of civil rights way before even that idea or that term of civil rights had even been coined, as we know in the 1930s, alongside, the likes of Benny Goodman and other, popular and important musicians at the time. But this was an era of brusque and sudden change. And I'm sure that the change that was political was also reflected in the music business, and it's possible that the music business was not as interested in his kind of music anymore, as you mentioned before. And I wonder if he just didn't mind about that too much because it didn't have anything to prove anymore after, by 1966, he had been recording for 40 years. So that could be a reason why, his career kind of tapered off, his recording career kind of tapered off after, the mid 1960s. What reasons do you think there could be for him not recording almost at all in the second part of the 1960s?
I think the main reason is that the pop music industry was aimed at the younger generation. I read somewhere once that it was the 8 to 14-year-olds, like the young teens. Right? So clearly, Bing, the way he looked and the way he was at that time, wasn't going to appeal to a younger generation at all. But it is also because of what Ken was saying about the other performers of Bing's generation, if you like, who weren't producing so much. It was as if the music industry had given up on that particular generation of solo singers to focus on a new type of pop standard, if you like.
Yes, it's quite brave that Bing did "Hey Jude," isn't it? Really, when you look back, at one time Bing said it was his worst ever album, but I often think he got it modelled with the other album he made in 1968. Um, what are your views on "Hey Jude, Hey Bing," the album?
I'll start here then because I do like the album, and I know that Anton, when you did your presentation on some of the country music, I think we included Lonely Street because
Yeah.
it has a country feel about it. And I do have to say I like all of the tracks on here, particularly Lonely Street and Both Sides Now. Hey Jude itself, I just wish he hadn't done the pom pom coda,
Yeah.
and maybe we can use AI to remove that now, and I think that would be an enhancement. But I wondered if Bing did that almost as a kind of as a comment on some of the tunes of the time, the way Sinatra did actually on oh, it was one of the Petula Clark hits. Downtown.
Downtown, yeah.
When he sings that, he kind of just at the end is almost like saying, "Oh, is this all I've got? This isn't really worth the effort," kind of thing. And I think the pom 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 was a similar thing. Like, "Oh, I've done it, but I don't really like it, so this is what I'm going to do at the end." That certainly isn't reflected on the other tracks. I
Yeah.
think they're all
I thought he
worthwhile.
was good. It was a good. I thought he sang well on "Hey Jude." I wasn't too sure about the Thoroughly Modern Bing album, though.
Mhm.
He seemed to rush those songs, and they could have done with a bit more. Repeat one or two, was my view.
Were both of those albums done to tracks, do you know, or were they recorded live?
No recorded live. Oh no, the Thoroughly Modern Bing was to tracks.
Yeah, I thought
Hey
so.
Jude was supposed to have the musicians in the studio with him.
I mean, I agree with you. I thought both of them reflected the fact that Bing would kind of do it and I'm happy with it, and that's good enough. And I'm away. Certainly, Hey Jude, I think could have every track on, with the exception perhaps of Those Were the Days. I think every track would have benefited from three or four more takes. The difference, if you look at Both Sides Now, the version he sings on the Hollywood Palace is wonderful because he gets the meaning of the song, and he gets a feel for the song, and he doesn't get that on the commercial recording. And and he talks about, I think he said it was a bit of madrigal about the arrangement on the Hollywood Palace, and a little bit more time in the studio just to experiment with that would have made such a difference. And I think that we've seen it with other albums, haven't we? Where Bing singing to tracks, you're locked into a particular key and a particular tempo. And if it's not quite right, you've nowhere to go. And I think that album certainly suffers from that.
Yeah. Thoroughly Modern Bing, for instance, when he sings Up, Up and Away, that
Yeah, I
goes
was
wrong
just
something.
thinking that.
Yeah.
That goes wrong
Totally
somewhere.
wrong key. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally wrong key, that one. As you're saying, that was, as
Mm.
you said, Ken, demonstrates the problems of singing to a backing a track that's already laid down. But and some of the slower tracks on that one, Malcolm, aren't so bad. Like Puff the Magic Dragon, I think he
Yes,
does.
that's
Well,
good. Yeah.
Chim Chim Tree is another one. So maybe it was the tempo that threw him
But you
on the
guessed they're
top.
low budget albums. I mean, Pickwick and Amos were
Oh.
low budget labels, weren't they? So they're not going to put a lot of money into the studio time and the musicians and the arranger, and that's reflected in that.
What you mentioned about Both Sides Now is something that is kind of recurrent in being in the 1960s. In my view, some of his performances on the television were much better than the ones on the record, and I'd rather see him and hear him on the TV than on the records often. But I would say that the case of Hey Jude, Hey Bing is an album that when I first heard it, I definitely didn't like it, but it does grow on you. The more you listen to it, I think the more you enjoy it. A little bit the reunion with Count Basie was a little bit like that as well. It's an album that and it's not from the 60s, but it kind of happens the same way for me. The more I listen to that album and to Hey Jude, Hey Bing, the more I like the albums and the more positive things I find, even on songs like I don't know, Those Were the Days or Both Sides Now, where there might not be the best in the bunch. But I would say that the more I listen to him, the more I like him. And in the case of Hey Jude, I think Bing's version of Hey Jude to my ears is much better than the one that Elvis Presley recorded later in the 1970s, which is, I don't think, as good vocally or even the attitude of the singer towards the song. I think Bing's attitude was so much better than Elvis when Elvis was doing it. And I think Bing does put the song across in a different way, of course, than Paul McCartney does with the Beatles. But it's still a worthwhile recording, I think, that version of Hey Jude.
It's interesting that the one track, I think the best track on the album is Those Were the Days, and it's different to all the other tracks because all the other tracks have a very strong strings orientation to the backing, and
Mhm, mhm,
Those Were the Days has those two or three Dixieland interludes,
mhm,
and they are terrific. And Bing somehow Bing's into that song on the album the way he's not really into any of the others, but might have got there with, as we said, with Both Sides Now, with a slightly different variation to the arrangement.
Yeah, Those Were the Days might be the longest track on there as well. I think is
Yeah,
it
Yes.
it
longer than
is 5 minutes.
Good? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But when I first listened to the album, the two I liked immediately was The Straight Life and Lonely Street, and they had
mhm.
such a 60s feel for me. I think again it was a little bit nostalgic, and I really enjoyed those two.
Yeah, my favorite still remains Lonely Street, and that's why I chose it for that presentation about country music, and not just because it is a country song by Carl Ballou, but because I really think it's a good recording. He does a good job on Those Were the Days. I think that's more associated with that British singer, right?
Mary
Mary
Hopkins.
Hopkins.
Mary
Hopkins.
Hopkins, that's right,
Yeah.
who recorded for
He had the hit record with it, yeah.
I think Nick Lucas also had a version of that song out around that same time, the crooner and guitar player. But yeah, Bing does a good version of that song, and it's interesting because we have begun with the last two albums
Yeah.
from the 1960s. We're not doing this chronologically, but that's fine. In the case of Thoroughly Modern Bing. I just don't like the choice of material in general to begin with, and then the arrangements usually are not up to the kind of arrangements that you would expect for a singer, the stature of Bing. It's I've never really understood that album very well. I wasn't sure if Bing was trying to make an album with songs for kids, the way Sinatra did some songs for kids like High Hopes and a few others, or what that was, because then some of the CD versions of that album also include a version of Love Is Blue. So it's hard to me. It's hard that's the biggest problem about that album, besides the keys or whether he has a good voice or not. It's just the very choice of material and the arrangements.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think the best recording didn't actually appear on the album in the States, I don't think, which was Where the Rainbow Ends.
Mm.
Um, and it did appear on the British release. But
Mhm.
again, there was a variation of that. I don't know if it was the album version or the single, but Bing whistles on one of them. And actually, I thought that was the one, particularly the one where he whistled. I thought that was a great recording, and it seemed it seemed ironic that not surprising that it left out the album, because it was different, so much better from all the other stuff that was on the album.
It was too good for
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Because he sang it on Hollywood Palace as well, didn't he? Where the
yeah,
Rainbow Ends.
yeah, yeah. And of course, his intro was uh, interesting. I think he said on the Hollywood Palace, there's not much call for me to make records these days, but I like this song, and I lost my head and made a record of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Going,
fortunately,
was
when
going.
the Rainbow Ends appears on the CD that I have, which I think came out on the Laserlight label, and so I was able to hear it, but originally it wasn't on the American version of the album. There is a song that's um, kind of like a patriotic song called "What's More American," and not even on a song like that, which is a patriotic song, does he seem to be into it, really.
no, no.
Mm.
There was a CD a year or two back, wasn't there, where they rebalanced it a little bit, and that did sound a little bit better. Not the Laserlight one since then. Came up with the
Oh,
original
right.
cover, but and they'd I mean, still be stuck with the arrangements, but the balance or
Mm.
something about it was a little bit different. The voice was more to the front.
I should say we seem to have started at the end. Um, I'd like to go back to 1960 with within 2 weeks, you've got Bing singing El Senor Bing, which is a very poor album, I thought. And then he does an album with Louis Armstrong, which is magnificent in my view.
Yeah, let's go back in time a little bit, 8 years prior to Hey Jude, Hey Bing, and start discussing those earlier albums from the 1960s. You mentioned Malcolm, El Señor Bing. We can start with that one, kind of like a Latin flavored album, which I really don't like it as much as the one he did in the 1970s, Bingo Viejo. I think Bingo Viejo is a lot better than El Señor Bing to my ears. But what do you think? What do you guys think about El Señor Bing as an album?
Uh,
Not an album that I ever listened to. Basically, I think the Billy May arrangements are just so far away from an authentic Latin sound.
Hmm.
And it reminds me of the sing-along albums, actually.
Yeah.
yeah,
There's a
Yeah.
lot of most of the tracks I think are 2-song medleys, aren't they?
Yeah.
And
They have the
again,
same bounce and the same feel as the
yeah, yeah.
long
And I
albums. Yeah.
suspect it wasn't done live. I think he probably sang it like he did with the sing-alongs to the tracks. And no, it's not compared with other singers at that time, early 60s. There were a lot. It was very much in vogue to do a Latin album. Nat King Cole did 2, 3, I think, wonderful albums.
And he was doing them in Spanish, in fact.
Yeah, went to South America
Phonetically in
and
Spanish. Yeah.
recorded them. Yeah.
Those are the records by Nat King Cole I first heard as a kid because my grandfather loved them. I didn't know as a kid that Nat King Cole was a jazz pianist or singer. I thought he was a guy with an American accent that sang, boleros and Spanish type
Oh,
songs.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Even his final albums had the sound of the sing-along albums that Bing had. I think, you know.
Did, yeah. They did, yeah. Yeah.
And 2 weeks after he did El Senor Bing, I think he did the one with Satchmo.
Yes.
There's some controversy as to whether they were in the studio together. I'm convinced they weren't, although some of the people who were there said they were. So I should back off, really. But
I think we've established that they weren't, haven't we now? Because didn't you found out that Louis was in the
yeah,
West
he was on.
Coast or
Yeah, he
something?
was on the East Coast, and
And
Bing was
I
on the
think
West Coast.
Will Freerolf finally came down with our view that they weren't in the.
They are forgotten that.
Yeah, and I think Will came to that conclusion as well. They're not, because if you listen to anything Bing and Louis do together live, it's
Yes.
full of ad lib and
Yeah.
good-natured chaos. Really, they almost make it up as they go along.
It's much
Yeah.
more spontaneous than
That's
you
right.
hear.
And
That's what
none
made
of
Gone
that.
Fishing, into a hit. The fact that they were just so irresistibly funny and good natured together.
Yeah.
But Bing, because he's working with Satchmo at arm's length, he's a lot more conscientious, I think, on that album.
Yeah.
He's trying hard.
I think when I first came across that album in a secondhand record store, I guess I was hoping it was more like Bing's performances with the All Stars, whether it was radio or from High Society. But of course, it's a very, very different sound from the All Stars, having Billy May and the chorus behind them.
Yeah. I think no, I think it's a great album, and it was in Will Friedroll actually used it in his book, didn't he, of the top 50 sort of vocal
Yes.
albums.
Yeah.
It's
a great book, that one.
It is a good album, and it reminds me that Wilfried will always talks about how important Bing Crosby and Louis Armstrong and their relationship was, both for jazz and pop music in the 1930s. And that chapter of jazz singing that Will Friedwell wrote is one of my favorite pieces ever written about Bing and Satchmo because of that. I think that, at this point, the some of the original freshness of their recordings together was lost, also because a lot of the records of this kind made in the 50s and in the 60s, they kind of look back at an earlier era, and so they don't come out of the era itself, if you know what I mean. But it's an album that I come back to very often because I like Louis Armstrong, and the two of them together just sound so good. Whether they are together or not, they really sound good. And then I like the fact that Johnny Mercer wrote some special material for this album, and particularly, if I had to name a song that I really love from that album is Sugar, That Sugar Baby of Mine. I think that to me is really a masterpiece from that album.
It's interesting you say that, because I one of the other things I did yesterday was sit down to come up with my top 5 60s recordings, and Sugar didn't make it into the top 5, but it was on the long list. And
well, maybe we could leave that for the end of the episode. You can maybe reveal at the end of the episode.
Yeah, okay.
That would be I would be interested in knowing.
Yeah.
But it's a great, and Bing's vocal and in the counterpoise with Louis on that really is terrific.
Yeah, I think Sugar and Lazy River are both masterpieces, as you say. But going back to what you mentioned earlier, Ken, it's a feel-good album, isn't it? As soon as you put it on, you feel lifted. It's it's medicinal, isn't it, in that respect?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now,
One thing I'd like your views on are the Longines
Mhm.
songs. What are your views on them?
Well, th those I think I would let Jason and Ken speak more about these because I've only heard a few of those. I have not heard the entire output. It is a few years later, but we can just, hopscotch around. That's not a problem. I'd like to know what you think. The idea is not a bad idea in my opinion. I wonder what you thought about how it was done and what the final product sounds like.
Yeah, I don't know how they come about, but I'm guessing at least a couple of people on this call know how they come about. But I think they were mail order, right?
Well, I
So
don't
again,
know.
I found them. Sorry, Ken, I found the box in a second-hand record shop. But my introduction to them was actually, do you remember the Alan Dell program? And
Yeah,
he always had what he called a Crosby corner on a Sunday afternoon,
yeah.
one track. And he played Friendly Persuasion at the time that I was getting into Bing, and I thought, yeah, that sounds really different to everything else that I've heard, Bing's voice and the backing. And it wasn't too much later that I realized it was one of the tracks from that set. But there was about 3 years, wasn't there, between the first album and the second? But they do sound like one, one entity, really. But some of in the second box set, there's some tracks where Bing does sing really emotionally, like the song is ended. It's quite an emotional performance by Bing, and others are his usual great up tempo and ad libbing, like "River, Stay Away from My Door." You know,
Mhm.
that's a great track. That one. I think I played that in one of our online meetings. In fact,
Because the tracks are all prepared here in the UK by Jeff Love. Put them all together for this mail order company. And, then you had to sing to tracks, which
Yeah.
he didn't like doing, but generally I quite like them. Some people don't like them, but generally I'm in favour of them.
I mean, I don't know the story of how they came about. I think it's very um, it's odd for in the mid '60s for Bing to suddenly do something like that. I mean, I actually ordered my set from the source, the mail order. I think the first I joined the club in '68, and I think Bing had just done the second set of recordings, and it was one in one of the early magazines. And I remember ringing up. There was a number that you rang. I had to, in those days, a long distance phone call was a big thing. So I had to ring
Yeah,
this number in London to place this order and send a postal order or something for it. And you were kind of then wondering, was this a scam and would these things actually turn up? And I think again there was a little bit of mischief about the marketing because it was badged Bing Crosby's Treasury, the songs I love. And there was a list of titles, but not all of them were Bing vocals. So
no, that's right.
so there would be maybe five songs per side on
yeah,
the LP, and only three of them were Bing vocals,
That's
yeah,
and
right.
two of the others were just Jeff Love
yeah,
instrumentals. And you didn't
And they
know at the time. I didn't know when I ordered. I didn't know which were the. Well, I'm not
no,
sure I knew that Bing wasn't singing all of them, but there
that's
was no
right.
clue as to which was Bing was singing on. And then you
Mm,
got a free sort of greatest hits early 30s
yeah,
record
yeah.
that came with it. Um, and yeah, but weird really. 'Cause I can't think of any other incidents where a singer of Bing statues has done something like that at that time. I mean,
yeah,
I suppose it was a reflection of the fact that there was no underpinning recording contract.
Mhm.
And certainly when you look at aside from the fact that the music business was changing, when you get to the mid 60s, Bing's whatever contractual arrangements Bing had with MGM or Capitol or Reprise, had been fulfilled and gone, and there was no ongoing or underpinning contractual relationship. So I suppose Bing and his managers were just responding to what offers kind of came their way. But the titles, the Longines titles are a great set of titles. They're the sort of songs Bing should have been singing. If you know, as we've said before, if he'd done some albums for Verve with that kind of catalogue, they would have, you know, with Frank Duvall or someone like that, they would be wonderful albums. Now
Yeah, you're right about the titles. They're more in keeping with traditional thing. I mean, Ball in the Jack is something he does very well. But I was surprised when it would have been the early 90s when I found the box set and got it home. And as you say, there was some instrumental track. And I thought, what happened there? Where's he gone? I didn't realize. That was strange. But wasn't it for a long time that we didn't know that Jeff Love was the orchestra leader? What was the story there?
Well, it came about because Les Gayler was talking to Jeff Love. Jeff Love told Les Gayler, I did those tracks for the year.
Because they were credited to someone called Michael Piastro, I think it was.
Yes, that's right. Michel Piastro.
Yeah, which was clearly just a nom de plume.
Yeah, I think the ones that I've heard are really, you know, charming, and I do compare them a little bit with the musical autobiography. Although the nice thing is there are songs in here that he hadn't recorded before, and that, you know, is, I think, gives a certain interest to this set, because, you know, there are songs that I love that I've heard by other singers, some of them going back to the 1920s, you know, people like Whispering Jack Smith, or, you know, Gene Austin, people like that. And here's Bing doing a version of that. And I think it's, you know, it's really well suited for his kind of, you know, music and the kind of taste that he had in music. And it's just too bad that they're not as widely available as they could be, because I have not heard all of them, just a few of them.
They've got one of my earliest sort of Crosby Club memories really in there, because I joined, I was 13 years old when I joined the club, I think in 67, and I'd seen an article in the press, and somehow I found Frank Murphy's address, who was the editor and secretary at the time, and wrote to him. I lived in Leeds at the time, and a week later there was a knock on the door. Obviously I lived at my parents' home, and there was Michael Crampton, now our secretary and treasurer. And I had Bing playing. It was like 5 o'clock. I'd just come from school. I had Bing on the Bing country hits or something on, and the first words Michael said was, "That's a fine voice," as you could hear the record playing in the background. And so that's how far Michael and I go back. But he very quickly invited me up to his home, and he had a wonderful stereogram with enormous speakers. To this day, I'm not sure I've ever heard anything that sounded as good as that. And I remember the first time I went, I remember him saying to me, "Oh, just listen to this. This is something special." And he played All Alone from the Longines set, and Bing's vocal on that is fantastic. The tone quality is great, and coming through these speakers of Michael's, I spent 60 years trying to replicate that sound really, and I don't think I've ever managed it. But I can still remember it. And again, you've heard me talk about our meeting with Bing and all the strange things that happened that final night. One of the other things that happened that final night at the Palladium was that Bing's opening song in his little look back intro was All Alone.
Yeah.
And looking back, I think that was uncanny as well. But just because of what that song meant to me and my friendship and relationship with Michael all those years.
It is a beautiful.
Have you guys got the Harry Lillis double CD issue that I think probably has all of the Long Island songs on it?
Yeah.
Do you have that one, Anton?
No, unfortunately, I don't have that. I think I have one, and that's where I've heard some of these songs. But I don't
contact Jeremy Rose. He may well have some spares.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I will definitely do that because I'd like to hear the rest of them and have the rest of them. All Alone is a great song. I think Sinatra also recorded that for an
Yeah,
album for
yeah,
Reprieve
yeah.
called All Alone, which is a
Yeah,
good and not very
yeah.
well-known Sinatra album.
The,
Now,
the arrangements are kind of anonymous. It's somehow fitting of the fact that they were done by Jeff Love anonymously because they're you can't fault them, but there's no flair, no personality about the arrangements. They are anonymous.
hmm,
Yeah.
I wonder if
They,
that was
they,
done on purpose, just
I mean,
kind of
yeah,
generic
even
so
even
that then
you say there's some
Bing could
nice
sing on
up-tempo ones like Dance with the Dolly and
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they're not there's nothing leaps out to compared with some of the even compared with some of the other stuff that Jeff Love did. He did a lot of work with Max Bygraves and there were some wonderful inventive arrangements even on the Max Bygraves sing-along albums. Um, but not on the Longines.
it.
Mm.
Well, you mentioned before that in the 1960s there were two soundtracks. One of them is The Road to Hong Kong, and the other one is Robin and the Seven Hoods, of course, with the Rat Pack. Let's discuss those briefly, and then maybe we can talk also about the holiday albums that he recorded in the 60s. But beginning with the soundtracks, what's your view on The Road to Hong Kong, which was done for Liberty Records, and Robin and the Seven Hoods for Reprise?
Well, I'll kick off. Road to Hong Kong arguably has the best ever Crosby Hope song in
Absolutely.
teamwork.
Yes.
Um, just
That carries the album, Ken, I think.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's fantastic. Uh, what a shame that Bing didn't live to do it again, as they were going to do on the album with Hope that was going to be routine the week after he died. But even though it is a soundtrack recording, isn't it? It's not a proper studio recording, but
Yeah.
it still comes across. A pity that he didn't record a studio version of "Let's Not Be Sensible"
Yeah. I was just thinking
with
that, Ken.
the final word.
Yeah.
Um, and
But we do have a TV version, don't we?
we
And I
do.
think it's
Yeah, I was just going to say, which is
1962
actually
TV. Yeah.
quite a nice,
Yeah.
a little bit more of a lightly swinging version, isn't it? And
Yeah.
but apart from that, you struggle to name anything else on the Road to Hong Kong album, really, wouldn't you? It's a miracle that they managed to get an album out of it, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's Robin and the Seven Hoods. I like that. That was a nice album.
Now, what I hear
Uh,
about Robin and the Seven Hoods is that originally the role that Bing plays was supposed to be given to Peter Lawford, but then there was a falling out between Sinatra and Peter Lawford related to JFK and
Yeah.
all those problems that there were, in which actually Bing was involved because
Yeah.
JFK, instead of staying with Sinatra, ended up
Mm.
staying with Bing, and Bing was
Yeah.
not a Democrat. But in any case,
Yeah.
and that was a big problem between some of the members of the Rat Pack, and Peter Lawford was basically kicked out of the Rat Pack for the rest of his life, and so Bing Crosby got to play that role in the film.
Mm. But the album is, I think it's got studio versions of the songs, right? It's not the
yes. Yes,
soundtrack
you're
Yes, it
right.
has.
Yeah.
version.
It has.
Yeah, whereas something like, for me, Mr. Booze is one of the greatest things Bing ever did on film, and
Yeah.
it works, of course, so much better on the film than it
Mhm.
does on the record, studio record. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just fabulous, that one.
I mean, the film itself, it was okay. Then Bing comes on the scene after about an hour, and then the film goes up quite a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'd say even when you watch the recording of Style,
Yeah.
it's not until Bing starts singing that it's
Yes.
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's taken the song to another level here, even though it's Sinatra and Dean Martin already kicking things off.
Yeah. 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 It was actually a pretty good album because apart from the Bing stuff, there was uh, what was Sinatra's big song? It was the
Well, one that I
Because,
like
Chicago.
Kind of town.
My Kind of Town, yeah.
Yes, My Kind of
And
Town. Although I like to lead when I dance that he does as
That's
well.
right. Yes.
yeah,
That's a
yeah.
pretty good song too.
And
Dean
Dean Martin has a
Martin.
very good song. Any man who loves his mother, which in the film he sang while he was playing pool.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a good album. There was the music and and Do Badder is a good. Bing's solo on Do Badder is again the scene in the film I think is better, but it's a decent record.
Yeah.
Is the movie one of your favorite Rat Pack movies or not so much?
No, not really. I don't think I've got any. Well, I don't know. I'm not a great lover of the Rat Pack, to be honest. So,
Same here. That's the only one I watch.
yeah,
It's just unfortunate that Bing arrived so late in the film.
Yeah.
Well, it's just
yeah,
that there are others like Ocean's 11 that I like better than Robin and the Seven Hoods. But fortunately, Bing is in this one, and so there's an
yeah,
extra reason to watch it. Well, we've spoken about the soundtracks, and there are a couple of Christmas albums on here that Bing recorded in the 1960s, and they're fairly different, one from the other. Because one of them is more traditional, and the other one is more modern with songs that are not traditional carols or traditional Christmas pop songs. One of them is I Wish You a Merry Christmas, and then later on for reprise, he did, I think, is it 12 Songs of Christmas?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what
Yeah.
it's called. Yeah.
yeah,
So let's start chronologically, if you will. I Wish You a Merry Christmas. That really is, to me, it really is a fantastic album. I love the sound. I like the arrangements, and I think Bing is in good form.
I agree. And it's done to tracks, which is amazing. I hadn't realized it was done to tracks.
Yeah.
yeah. And all done in
So-
one day, wasn't it? Wasn't all
That's what it said. That's what it says. I don't know if that's true.
I mean,
About three different arrangers as well, I think, or three different orchestra leaders there.
but you could imagine Bing doing 12 when you're singing to tracks because you're not going to do that many takes because there's not much you can change really. I mean, once Bing gets it right all the way through, Bing's going to say next number, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
And there were songs, mainly he knew all the songs, didn't he? Which would help.
he did, yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, and there's that sort of there's a naturalness about the singing that suggests to me that they were all second or third take at most. And as you said, Bing knows the songs and the keys right, and the generally in contrast to the other ones we've talked about, the tempo and the pace is right.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, just another version of the Winter Wonderland appeared. Do you remember that
Yeah.
one, Malcolm? We played
Yes.
it at one of our face-to-face meetings, and it actually sounded like it was a run-through, as
Yeah.
if it was just running through as a practice, as a rehearsal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas songs like "Oh Holy Night," you
Yes.
can't believe that was done to a backing track. It's
Yeah.
an outstanding performance. It really is.
And
You
there
can
are-
see him standing in front of a great orchestra and choir, can't you? When you play
Yeah.
that one.
There are hundreds of versions of "Oh Holy Night," and to me, it's hard to find one that's as good as Bing's. Bing does a wonderful version of that song. And another thing that I like about the album is that whenever he does two songs, like a medley kind of thing, those two songs really go well together. Unlike on El Señor Bing, where he's just putting two songs together, but there's no rhyme or reason for that. But here, I feel like the songs that he does as medleys really work well together.
The Littlest Angel is an interesting song, isn't it? I don't think I've ever heard anybody else sing that. And it's presumably a relatively new song at the time, but Bing sings it very well.
It's one of those songs I think we mentioned before about at that time when Bing occasionally really sang in the bass range, and that particular track is a prime example.
What do you think about the cover? I love that drawing of Bing. This has been released and reissued many times with different covers in different
Yeah.
countries by different labels. But the original, which there it is. It appears behind Jason now. It really is rather charming. I like that
It's,
drawing.
yeah, it is. Yeah,
And
yeah.
it has all the colours of Christmas, doesn't
Those.
it?
I wonder if it's the same artist who did the Bing's Hollywood covers. Looks. So there's a lot of similarity in
Style, yeah.
Bing's face.
Mm.
Now
Yeah.
you mentioned the Littlest Angel, and that's sort of a newer song, and that's a pretty good segue for the other album, which is 12 Songs of Christmas,
Mm.
that includes songs that are not well known and are not classic, Christmas songs that we think of whenever we think of Christmas. But there's some good stuff in there as well.
Yeah, I think on Sunday we played I think it's the Frank DeVol version of Secret of Christmas.
Yeah.
And there's a version on this album with Fred Waring, and it's quite long. It's about 5.5 minutes long. Sounds very
Mm.
different to the Frank DeVol version. So I guess that's a more modern, well, because it's written for same one for me, I guess. Yeah.
Because it was two duets with Sinatra, I think, wasn't it? Then Bing and Sinatra each did three solos, and were there two Fred Waring solos? I think 10 tracks.
Yes, in fact, all of I'm looking at at the list of songs in here, and there's altogether 12 songs.
Right. Okay.
But a lot of them are new songs, and of course some of them are classic songs that you come to expect that Bing would do. But the ones that I think more interested in are the ones that are seldom heard on this
Mhm.
album.
Christmas Candles, I think, is the standout. Again, little teaser. It made my long list for my. In fact, it made my first cut of my top five. But then I decided I couldn't have more than one Christmas record in there. So you'll have to just think about what the Christmas record might be that would displace it. So I took it out. But I think Christmas Candles is a one just a wonderful example of Bing using his voice and that those bass tones in his voice. It suits him to a T. And there's a lot of little Crosby mannerisms in his phrasing and so on in there. I think it's a wonderful track.
And he wouldn't
I
have
think
known much about it, would he? Because George O'Reilly brought it across, played it to Bing. Bing rang up the record producer. They wrote the arrangement, went in the next morning, recorded it. I mean,
Is that right? I didn't know that. George took it over, really?
yeah,
Oh, so who wrote it? Who wrote the song?
I forget. Obviously, somebody Irish, I guess.
An
But
Irishman. Wow. Gosh, I didn't
yeah,
know that. Wow.
have to look into that. We'll get Stephen Crowley on the case, I think.
Wow.
yes,
We got
But Ken, you've given it away about your what must be the Christmas track on the top five thing, which obviously isn't one that was on one of those albums, but was probably the single one of the singles that Bing recorded, I guess.
on 12 Songs of Christmas, we have four tunes by Fred Waring, three tunes with Bing and Fred Waring, and then two with Bing, Frank, and Fred Waring,
Right. Yeah.
and then three by Frank with Fred Waring. So Fred Waring is there through and through, but
All the way
Bing
through.
Crosby
Yeah.
gets to do three songs, and Sinatra gets to do three
Mm.
songs as well, and then they duet on two. It's really a good album, and I think Bing would explore this idea of newer Christmas songs in the 70s with A Time to Be Jolly, which
Yeah.
it's left out of the scope of this conversation, but that's not the last album of Christmas music that Bing recorded in his career.
And if you're going to do an album with a choral backing, Fred Waring was one of the best, really. I mean, the sing-along albums, if they'd been done with Fred Waring, would have been a lot better than
It's a good point. Yeah.
the way they were. They'd been done with something like Ray Conniff, they would have been a lot better. But yeah, he's good. Fred Waring's. I think "Go Tell It on the Mountain" is a good track, and a big part of that is because of the Fred Waring choral contribution.
Now,
The
Fred,
sing-along albums,
mhm.
I'd had them over the years, but when they were kind of remixed for CD, I thought they jumped up quite a lot better once they were remixed.
Yeah.
They were very flat.
I'd say
before,
you might be right, because when I bought the original albums, again, I would have found them in a secondhand record shop. But I remember that, like Bing sings 101 gang songs. I only ever played it once. I knew I wouldn't play it again.
Yeah.
So if I've got the CD, if it sounds better, I wouldn't know, because I only played the LP
There was one
once.
that was remixed with a children's chorus, wasn't there? And I thought
Oh
that
yeah,
sounded better with the children's
yeah,
chorus rather than
yeah, yeah.
the original thing. But I think Jason probably said it earlier. I suspect that was pure commercialism. There was a letter I think you reproduced in the magazine some issues back where Bing talked about doing them and said something about they seem to be going very well, or they're selling well, or something like that. So I think it was commercialism that drove it.
I've always thought that those records were just, a product of their time, and they should be left
yeah.
in their time, in my opinion. I haven't really listened to them a lot. I don't have them shrink wrapped or anything, but I did play them at least once. But they're definitely not my favorite part of Bing's 60s output. And there were quite a few of them, with lots of songs on them as well, and
Yeah.
just snippets of songs that
And of course, there were the two
time.
sort of spin-offs as well, Bing on the happy side and Bing
Yes.
on the sentimental side,
Yeah.
which were for Warner Brothers, as were the sing-along albums, but they were similar in concept, weren't they? They were all medleys. Am I right in thinking Jeff Love did the backing for at least one of those on the sentimental side? Did we discover that? Because of course that was never
No,
issued.
it was a British band leader, but it wasn't Jeff Love.
Wasn't Jeff
Yeah,
Love,
his
right?
name was
Ivor
Raymond.
Raymond comes to mind.
Raymond, yeah, is
Oh, right.
credited on both of them, in fact.
Oh, is
Yeah,
it? Right,
and
that's it.
yeah, and in fact, on the sentimental side, I don't think they got a distribution contract at the time, so it was held. It wasn't even released until
No, it
about
wasn't.
2010
Wasn't.
or something, wasn't
That's
it?
right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, for a long time, I remember there was some doubt as to whether it existed. It was one of these. It was like the Bing, Dino, and Dixie album. There
Oh,
was
yeah.
talk of it, but no one had any proof that it actually existed.
Well, we're getting through most of the albums. We have just a few left. We mentioned Fred Waring, and he appears also on America, I Hear You Singing, which is a, patriotic album that, was done for Reprise Records. And Bing sings some songs that you have a hard time imagining him singing, like "This Land Is Your Land," for example, by Woody Guthrie, and still does a fine job with him. Again, it's not one of my favorite albums from the 60s, but it's one I do listen to once in a while,
Mm.
especially around the 4th of July. And it's got some good cuts on there. What do you think about that? America, I Hear You Singing record, which for the longest time I didn't have, and then finally was reissued on CD, and I was able to grab it.
No, I can't comment on this one because I really haven't played it. I don't have the CD. I have the LP. Again, I may have played once or twice. And in fact, my most recent visitation was on that radio broadcast that came out a few months back,
Mhm,
and we
mhm.
knitted it into one of the meetings. So no apologies, guys. I don't really have much to say on this one.
I prefer the Christmas album
Mhm.
because I think in the main I'm not keen on the songs on America I Hear You Singing. I'm trying now to remember. He does one with Sinatra. Let Us Break Bread Together, I think it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
It's a horrible,
Yeah.
awful song. And,
And that is supposed to be a traditional song, really.
was it really?
Yeah.
God. What's the other one? What's the other duet with Sinatra on?
This is a
Uh,
great country, is it?
this is
No,
Oh, that's a solo, isn't it? This is a
oh,
great.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
solo
that's a
we've got.
solo. The one with Sinatra is, I'm trying to
We've never had it so good. Was
It's
it
You
one?
Never Had It So Good by
Oh,
Shami Khan and Jimmy Van Heusen. Yeah.
yeah, no,
You know,
Too
yeah,
unforgettable.
usually I have problems with patriotic songs, not from an ideological point of view, but just as a topic. It's just not easy to write a good patriotic song. And Irving Berlin did it really well once in a while. He did some patriotic songs, like
God
what is
bless America.
God bless
God Bless
America.
America, which it's a good tune. It's an endearing lyric. But when it comes to patriotic songs, one of my favorites has always been the House I Live In that Sinatra did, simply
Yeah,
because of the universal theme that I think goes beyond just the purely patriotic. It could be patriotic in America, but it could also be patriotic somewhere else. And a lot of the patriotic songs are too tied to the country that they're trying to praise. And that's one of the things that I usually don't, care about as much when it comes to that kind of music from wherever it comes. I'm not just talking about American patriotic songs, but just from anywhere in the world. So no, one of your favorites, America. I hear you singing from what I can see. Uh, but there's one that we have not mentioned from early on, which is Holiday in Europe.
mm.
I think that one came out in 1960, and to me, that's one of my favorite Bing Crosby albums, not just from the 60s, but just in general. I think it's a really, really good album. What do you guys think about that one?
But this was
Yes,
another one that was sung to backing tracks, right?
that's
That were
right.
already
But
laid down.
Bing came over here, went and recorded 4 tracks at the Decca Studios, and we got all the rehearsal takes and all the rest. And I didn't think they were that bad, but anyway, it was obviously decided they'd asked the orchestra leader to do all the orchestral tracks and send them across, and Bing redid them all. So there we are. But yeah, there's some good tracks there.
Yeah, it was May 61 when he did the 12 released items. The
That's right.
session in London was October 1960.
Yeah.
It was kind of odd. It never really been clear as to whether that October session was just a test session for the pre-recording of the background vocals, because
Well, it could be.
it didn't look as though Bing was geared up to do more than that one session. So he was never going to do more than three or four
Yeah.
songs.
And what interests me is that in those days, uh, the American Musicians Union was pretty strong. And Bing comes across here, gets some orchestral tracks laid down, and then the name of the orchestra disappears. Uh, it's all a
Yeah.
bit suspicious. I'm sure it was a device to get around paying expensive
Mm.
American musicians.
It was Malcolm Lockyer, wasn't it, who did
Yeah,
he was the arranger and the conductor.
but I think
Yeah.
he disappears from the LP, doesn't he? Doesn't he?
I think he does. Yeah, he's not mentioned, but it's a good album. I think it's
Yeah,
a nice
Yeah.
concept. Traveling around Europe, and Bing's in good voice. The arrangements are good. There's a nice bit of variety around them. There's um, some unusual stuff. Letter to Pinocchio is a
yeah.
very
Yeah.
unusual.
That actually led me to discover the original Italian song that was a huge hit in Italy apparently around that time. And I hadn't heard of it before, but I heard Bing's version. I kind of liked it. I did
Mm,
write an article years ago about this album for Bing magazine, and I got a chance to listen to this album a lot. I think it might have been when it was reissued on CD.
yeah,
And I really like the concept because there are a lot of albums like Dean Martin did Italian albums and French albums and stuff like that. But this idea of like traveling around Europe is rather
yeah,
unique, really. And he actually, takes a little bit of, Portuguese fado with April in Portugal, which really is a
yeah.
song called Coimbra, which is a Portuguese fado song, which is kind of like the Portuguese blues, to just, simplify a little bit. It's beautiful Portuguese music, but there's also Greek music. There's also French,
Yeah.
Italian. I mean, it's really well done and it's quite elegant, and I like the cover as well. So it's just
Mm,
Yeah.
a good all around album, I think.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I
I
was
agree.
introduced to this one as well from the Alan Dell Alan Dell show, he played Pigala. You mentioned the French sound.
Yes.
It's very French sounding, isn't it? And typically at the end, a very typical Alan Dell comment as the track finished. He said, and that's nice.
Another traveling album, Sinatra made traveling albums popular with "Come Fly with Me" for Capitol
Mm,
in the late 50s.
yeah.
Uh, Bing, of course, "Fancy Meeting You Here." There's a second part, so to speak, of "Fancy Meeting You Here," which is that traveling two beat with Rosemary Clooney. I don't mean to compare them because if I had to choose one, it would be "Fancy Meeting You Here." But
Mm.
I feel like the second installment's not bad either. What do you think?
I
I
like
think
it.
it's good. Again, it was done to tracks, wasn't it? Bing and Rosie were not in the studio together. Rosie was starting the downward spiral, I think, of
Mm.
drugs and alcoholism at the time. We've got that wonderful rehearsal tape of Bing singing "Come to the Mardi Gras" with is it Jay Livingston standing in doing
Yes, yeah.
Rosie's vocal, which is "You're very brave, Mr. Livingston," Bing said at the end, which I think it's wonderful. But um, no, the material's good. I mean, it was Livingstone and Evans, I think, who wrote some new material for the album. I like the arrangements. I always think the actual technical quality of the recording
Mm.
is poor. There's a sort of tinniness about the sound. I've never heard a version of it that sounded the way I think it should
Yeah.
sound. I don't know why that would be, but
Yeah, because
but
that's unusual for Capitol engineers,
it
isn't it?
is.
Really,
Yeah,
they
it's
were
very
top
that is
notch.
very unusual. I don't know whether I'm just the only one, but all always sounds a bit. I don't know, a bit tinny, a little bit harsh, or something just not quite right with that. But and yeah, it was good album. Of course, they did Bing and Rosie did a very good TV medley of it, didn't they? On one of Bing's shows, and somewhere about 65. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
a good
I think the
album.
problem the album has is, as you've already mentioned, is it's constantly being compared to Fancy Meeting You Here, which is a
Yeah.
really classy album. And whereas had this happened on its own, we'd probably think of it a bit differently, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, fortunately, the Internet Archive, archive.org has, all of those or a lot of those radio shows that Bing and Rosie did together, and those are always a treat to hear. And of course, these studio albums are, just as much of a treat to hear. I like both of the albums, so I don't think there's any need to compare. And of course, Rosemary Clooney was an absolutely fantastic singer that you guys also wrote about. We need to plug that album, that book, Late Life Jazz, which I have read, and it's really enjoyable. And it led me to, well, buy a lot of records by Rosemary Clooney that I didn't have.
Yeah, yeah. Same here. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think we only have about a couple more records to discuss before, moving on to that finale where we'll hear from Ken's top five and maybe like a final appraisal of Bing's recordings from the 60s before we close this 10th episode of the yearly Bing Crosby podcast. One thing that Bing didn't do in the 60s that it's too bad that he didn't do was a Brazilian album because I think, if he had done a bossa nova album, that would have been fantastic. His voice
Yeah.
was good for that, and pretty much everybody else, from Andy Williams to Perry Como to Sinatra, of course, d did some, interesting forays into Brazilian music. But Bing never did that. He did return to the Paradise Islands, though on an album of the same name, where he revisits a kind of music that he actually helped popularize in the United States. Because Bing
Mm.
Crosby was one of the first recording superstars that popularized Hawaiian and Hawaiian style music in this country. That album is fortunately available on CD on a very good edition, and I'd just like to hear your comments on an album that I really do like quite a bit, Return to Paradise Island.
Well,
Yeah, I like it too, and I find it interesting how it seems to divide the Crosby camp actually. And I bought it when it was reissued on LP in the 1980s. I've since had found a copy in a secondhand store, so I had this pristine copy in what was like the original cover, and still had in the corner newly recorded, which I guess at the time would have been like to distinguish it from a compilation Hawaiian album. And no, I thought it was great. The title track, or Return to Paradise, is a beautiful ballad of Bing's, and Keep Your Eyes on the Hands again is a really feel good song, isn't it? That one.
I wasn't impressed with it to start with on LP, but when Robert Bader remixed it for CD, I thought it took on a whole new level, and now I really like it.
I'm in the other camp, I'm afraid. I've never liked it and still don't. I agree it's better since they remix the vocals, but it just seems to me to be it's a set of missed opportunities really, because I don't think it's very Hawaiian, really. Maybe I don't know, but how Andy Williams did a Hawaiian wedding song album in the 60s. It's much more Hawaiian
Mhm.
than Return to Paradise Island. So I'd have liked something like that. And it's such a missed opportunity for being working with Nelson Riddle. I mean,
Yes.
all the other things that they could have done together.
But
Um,
what's interesting about that, Ken, for me is that I've always been a big follower of Nelson Riddle, and anything that Nelson Riddle did with whomever it was, of course with Sinatra, but also with many others, including Rosie Clooney, I like to listen to. And he did not do a lot of Hawaiian stuff.
no,
And that might be the problem, that
yeah,
it's not something that he was really well versed in, and maybe it wasn't the best choice of material. But it is interesting because it is Riddle doing something that he hadn't done before, or that you
yes,
can't find anywhere else. And for me,
yeah,
that's interesting, really.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. No, those are good points, Anton.
And finally, there's a country album. I mentioned that Bing introduced pretty much Hawaiian music into American pop mainstream music, but I'm not going to say necessarily that he introduced country music to pop audiences, but he did help quite a bit in the 1930s with his cowboy style recordings, and that actually helped popularize the singing cowboy in the movies, both himself and then of course Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and all Tex Ritter and all the others. There is a country album that Bing did in the 60s, and it's called Bing Crosby Sings the Great Country Hits. And it's an album of mostly what they used to call at the time Nashville sound songs, or countrypolitan songs is what they used to call it. That kind of more polished, string-laden country music. It's an album that, again, a little bit like Hey Jude, Hey Bing. The first time I heard it, I wasn't too sure about it. But the more I heard it, the more I liked it. And when I was hosting a classic country music radio show on station WRVU in Nashville years ago, I used to play tracks from Bing Crosby singing country music in the 30s and 40s. But I also, once in a while, would slip in one of these from Sings the Great Country Hits. I hear he wasn't in good health when he did that album. He had a cold or something along those lines, and that impacted maybe the final product. But what do you think about Sings the Great Country Hits? Are you country music fans, or are you not interested in country music? But uh, apart from that, what do you think about the album?
We know about Lainey Wilson, don't we? That's the country.
That was a good duet. That was a good
Yeah,
electronic
yeah,
duet.
yeah. Sorry guys, if I can go first then, because I too, the album grows on you for sure. But I think I've said this before, when even from the opening track, I think it's "Oh Lonesome Me," is that if you were introducing somebody to Bing Crosby and you played that album, they would think he was a country singer. I think it's that good in terms of the genre. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's the best album of the 60s. It's the
Wow.
first stereo
Yeah.
album that I bought. It was the one playing the day Michael Crampton knocked on the door. It's I mean, it would have been better if Bing had done it again with after he'd got over the cold, I think, and there was an 18-month delay before it was released because I think Capitol were trying to get him to redo it, but uh, perhaps it would have been better without that deep sort of nasal sound. It would have been interesting to know what it would have sounded like had he done it in Nashville rather than in California. But for me, the thing I like about it is that Bing sounds so comfortable with the material and sings so freely and easily. And it'd be wonderful to hear the session tapes if they're
You
still
know,
around.
I'd
Because
like to speak to that briefly since you mentioned that. I've always thought Bing Crosby felt comfortable with this country material, specifically on this album, the Nashville sound style of country music, because I feel like the singers that made the Nashville sound popular, people like Jim Reeves, like George Morgan, like Eddie Arnold, all of them were influenced by Bing.
Mm.
You know, even some of them were called country crooners. So I feel like that's the reason why this material is just tailor-made for Bing's voice.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it was done live, I think. Oh, we know it was done over 3 days, don't we? And so I think I think it was presumably if it hadn't been done live, Bing would have just waited till he got over the cold and done it again when his voice was normal. So the fact that he had to do it with a cold suggests that everything was set for those 3 days, and it you just something about an album that is done live. Yeah, there's just a different feel to it, isn't there? I think, and I just get the sense of being there in the studio, really enjoying himself with
Yeah.
that material.
I think that's why I don't feel that Bing's cold, it is derogatory to the album myself. So, and I think it's because of those other qualities that you said that he's so comfortable with it. It's easy. It's mid-tempo, typical Bing rhythmic sound, and as Anton said, it's a very specific Nashville country sound, isn't it?
Wasn't Glenn Campbell one of the guitarists?
He was.
Yes, he
Yeah.
was a he
He
was a
was.
Wow.
session musician for many years before he hit it big with Gentle on My Mind and Rhinestone Cowboy and all those big hits he had in the 60s and 70s. But he was a fantastic guitar player. He really was, Glenn Campbell, and he was on that session among many others in Nashville before making it big. Now, Ken mentioned that to him this is the best album that Bing did in the 1960s. And I was going to ask you anyway, if you had to choose one album of Bing's in the 1960s, which one would that be? I suspect Ken is going to say the Great Country Hits, but I don't know. I give you a chance to change your mind if you would.
No, I'd say the Great Country. I think that the possibly the best album in terms of Bing singing, sound of his voice, and so on is the first Christmas album. I Wish You a Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
But from a point of view of an album that I enjoy and play lots and lots, it would be the Great Country Hits for me.
Mhm. What about Malcolm, for example, or
Oh,
Jay?
the Christmas one, 62, is his best album.
I Wish You a
Quick,
Merry Christmas?
yeah, closely followed by Return to Paradise Islands, which I've grown to really like in the last few years.
Jason?
Yeah, I think look, the same thing. I Wish You a Merry Christmas is an outstanding performance from any decade, actually. And as much as I like the country hits, I'm going to go with the Long Island's set because it's a very specific sound and a very specific the sound of Bing singing that every man thinks he sounds like in the shower. You don't, of course, but that's what
I
I think
like
that
all I like
epitomizes
all
that.
your choices really, and I could choose any of those, but I think I'm going to go with Bing and Satchmo because I just love Bing and Satchmo together, and it's an album that I do play quite a bit. Um, even when I had that radio show in Nashville, and I was supposed to be playing old country music for no reason, sometimes I would play a song from Bing and Satchmo. People didn't understand why, but uh, I still did it. I just really like that album, Bing and Satchmo, closely followed by Holiday in Europe as well. But the ones that you mentioned are great choices as well. We've gone through
Solve a dilemma for us, Anton, would you? How do you pronounce is it Longines or
I'm
Longines?
not sure.
Longines.
I took 10 years of French, and if it is a French name, I think it would be Longines.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
for 20 odd years, I always called it the Long Island album. And then
Yeah.
someone pointed out to me the Johnny Mercer, Bobby Darin duet. And there's a line in there where he says, why he's winding his Longines. And I thought,
Yeah.
oh,
oh,
I
I
think
love
I've been
that
getting
album.
this
There's
wrong.
the
I
answer.
know the one you're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah. Uh, Bobby Darin and Johnny Mercer. I can't remember the title of it right now.
Two of a kind. Two of a
Two of a
Yeah.
kind.
kind. There you go.
Superkind.
Two
Yeah.
of a kind.
Yeah.
Best vocal duet album there's ever been, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
I've always,
After
I've,
Fancy Meeting You. Yeah.
very, yeah, that's right. Very funny, both of them, really. Fancy meeting you here, and two of a kind. Well, anything that Johnny Mercer did, I'm always interested in. And whenever I get a chance to visit Savannah, Georgia, which is about 10 hours from here by car, but I do go there sometimes. I do try to go to Bonaventure Cemetery and just pay a visit to the gravesite of Johnny Mercer right there in his hometown of Savannah, Georgia, because I do believe Johnny Mercer to be one of the biggest American poets of the 20th century. Now, some people who disagree with me on that, they would say, "Oh, he wrote songs." That would be a topic for a different podcast. Now, to finish today, this 10th episode of the Yearly Bing Crosby podcast that I've really enjoyed, having the chance to chat with the three of you today, and we hope we'll do it again next year. Ken, we have a top five that maybe we could reveal or unveil, from five to one. What do you think?
Okay, well, they're not, I haven't got them in order, one to
Oh,
five.
you
I just
don't? Okay.
five.
Then
So,
no.
and it's the kind of thing that I did this yesterday. If I did it again today, I would have a different five, I suppose. I had 15. I had a long list of 15. I won't go through it, but we've talked about most of them. The one we haven't talked about on this podcast is What Do We Do with the World, which of course we featured
Oh,
prominently
yes.
in my
Yeah.
reprise presentation. Unusual song, very much out of left field, but a great recording. On the long list, but didn't make it into my top five. So, and another rule I set for myself was that I wouldn't have more than one Christmas song in the top five, which is why Christmas Candles briefly entered and then fell out again. So, my top five: April in Portugal. Lovely, bright song, good vocal. Being in 1961, sounding unimpaired in any way, shape, or form. Second, the one that Jason's already guessed. Do you hear what I hear? Marvelous vocal, authoritative, sensitive. Tough to come up with a better Christmas recording anytime, I think, than that one. Number three, Oh Lonesome Me, because it typifies the great country hits album. It was the it was the only song on the album that I'd heard before I bought the album. So in a way, it kind of led me to buy the album. I just love the vocal. I love the whistling interlude in the middle. Bing just sounds so comfortable and at ease. Number four, All Alone. Partly for the reasons I've talked about earlier, but I do think it's the best Longines vocal. And as I talked earlier about the rather uncanny way it turned up in 1977. And then the last one probably will surprise you, but it's the oldest established from the Reprise Repertory series, for the simple reason that I think it's like a heavyweight championship of the world about. There's Bing with possibly his two primary contenders in 1963, and he just outsings them completely on that recording. Always surprised that the way being reprising it being Sinatra, that when the stereo separation was done, Bing was in the middle, and somehow that typifies it. Bing just controls the whole song from start to finish, and I never tire of listening to that. So they're my top five.
Well, that's a great top five, and that final song actually gives us the chance to mention that there's also the musical repertory theater that I have here on the list, and we didn't really touch upon it very much, uh, but there's Guys and Dolls, Finian's Rainbow, and South Pacific, and the idea was to present quality productions of um, popular uh, plays, musical plays like the ones I mentioned, using some of the singers and musicians that at that time were recording for Reprise. At the time that Reprise was still a company that was owned or partly owned at least by Frank Sinatra before he actually sold it, and then Reprise became something else. But the idea for Frank was to have a company that would allow him to do two things. One was to have more control of his own records, and the other one was to be able to hire some of his friends to be on the label, and that he did. And one of them was Bing Crosby, who recorded several albums for Reprise Records, and that really is the the genesis of this conversation that we've had today, which has to
Can I
do.
just mention Younger in Springtime from that set? If I had to give a top five, Younger Than Springtime would be one of mine.
Does Jason want to add any special favorites, that you can think of right off the bat?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've discussed most of my guests. I mean, Do You Hear What I Hear is if ever there was a Christmas song overshadowed by White Christmas, that was the one. And I mentioned earlier Mr. Booze, although the movie version is so watchable because of the way. And again, that's another album where really Bing's here, and even Sammy Davis and Frank and Dean are down here because it's his song. Without doubt, it's his song. Lonely Street, I do like that one from the Hey Jude, Hey Bing, and again because of that country beat as well. And from the Longines set, then I chose the song is ended. I think again it's an Irving Berlin song, but was sung with a lot of feeling at that time by Bing. And although I didn't choose the Bing and Louis album, I'm going to choose Sugar as an outstanding song from the 60s there.
Sugar would be one of my all-time favorites from the 60s for sure, with that counter melody and Bing Crosby doing those asides about sugar and H2O or CH, the the scientific formula of sugar, and then he talks about flapjacks. I mean, it's just a fantastic song. So if I could choose
All of
one,
them, all the ones you've mentioned were all on my long list. So if I was doing the short list on another day, I might have picked all of them.
Right.
and
You're
that is
right, though, Ken. No, tomorrow you'd pick another five. It'd be the same for me, Ken.
that's the problem with Bing, which is a good problem to have. And
Sure.
I just think that's a great way to close this conversation for this year, 2025. Ken, thank you very much for participating and also for your excellent presentation on the Reprise years of Bing Crosby, which, as I said before, was the spark that ignited this episode of the yearly Bing Crosby podcast. I hope then in about 365 years we can see you again here.
I'll do my best. Yeah.
And Jason, thank you also for participating and also for the great work you do every month with those monthly meetings of the ICC. We will leave those meetings on a link in the description of this video. So if anybody wants to, um, check them out, and they're really well worth it. But they would never happen if not for the hard work of Mr. Liddiard. So thank you, Jason.
Yeah. Here.
And also thank you, Malcolm. It's 10 years later, and we still have the same passion for Bing Crosby. So let's do it for at least another 10. How about that?
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, well done, guys.
And with this, we finish this 10th episode of the Yearly Bing Crosby podcast on my YouTube channel, Anton GF. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any comments, just leave them underneath the video. And of course, we will respond if there are any questions or anything that you would like to know. And also check out the International Club Crosby and become members, because that's a great way to keep the flame of Bing Crosby's figure in life and career and music alive. That's what we do with as much passion as we can at the ICC. So thank you, Malcolm, Jason, Ken, and everybody for listening. We'll be back in 2026, which will be the centennial of Bing Crosby's first recording in 1926. I got the girl. I got the girl. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy holidays.
Same to you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.